She was standing 20 feet from the man who loved her, and he was telling his entire family she meant nothing. Olivia Carter had $42 yellow shoes in her purse. Soft leather, the color of afternoon sunlight. She'd bought them 3 days earlier because buying them made the pregnancy real. And making it real meant she finally had to tell him. She had rehearsed it 40 times. 2 glasses of water on the marble island, the ultrasound photo on the counter, the shoes beside it. But the door to Damien Moretti's penthouse was open. Just a crack. Just enough to let the voices through. And then she heard her own name. Olivia. Not Damien's voice. His father's. Vincent Moretti. Flat. The way you say the name of a problem you've already decided how to solve. This has gone on long enough. A pause. The particular silence of men who all know who's in charge. Then Damien. I'm aware. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been spending an awful lot of time with a girl who has no idea what she's walked into. Someone else spoke. Loose, amused, the voice of a man who thought this was entertainment. She's pretty, I'll give him that. She's beautiful, Damien's voice. That exact note of warmth Olivia knew. The one she heard at 2 a.m, when he was tired and his defenses were down. She's smart, she's funny, she doesn't perform. With her, there isn't one. Olivia felt her hand press flat against the wall. She didn't remember moving. So what is she? The amused voice asked. Serious? You thinking of doing something stupid? A beat. Olivia felt her breath suspend itself completely. No. Damien's voice. Steady. Clear. It was never serious. It's been a good 6 months. She's been good. But it's not serious. Laughter rolled through the dining room. The easy, comfortable kind. The kind that belongs to people who have been right about something. Does she know about you? Another voice. Older. Deliberate. No. No hesitation. And she never will. More laughter. Softer this time. The polished, private kind. Olivia did not move. She was aware, with the strange precision that only arrives in moments of complete internal rupture, of the exact weight of her purse on her left shoulder, the yellow shoes inside, the ultrasound photo in the inner pocket, the faint sound of traffic 43 floors below, the way her body had made the decision her mind hadn't finished making yet. She turned around. She walked to the elevator. She pressed the button. The doors opened in 11 seconds. She counted. She did not cry. She did not shake. She did not let herself feel anything in that elevator, because if she started feeling anything in that elevator, she would fall apart before she reached the street. And she was not going to fall apart in Damien Moretti's building, where someone might see her, where someone might report back, where she might become a story that got told at another dinner table with that same comfortable laughter. She walked 3 blocks before she stopped at a bodega and bought a bottle of water she didn't drink. She stood on the sidewalk outside a bodega on East 73rd Street with $42 shoes in her purse and the city moving around her like it didn't know anything had just ended. And she made a decision right there. He would never know. Not about tonight, not about the baby, not ever. But here's the thing about secrets. They don't stay secret because you decide they will. They stay secret because nobody comes looking. And Damien Moretti was about to come looking. 3 days later, he called her number. Disconnected. He tried again. Same. He sent a text. No read receipt. He had his security man check her building in Astoria. Vacated. Approximately a week ago. No forwarding address. No trail. She had simply ceased to be in New York. He assumed she was angry. He ran back through the last few weeks looking for the thing he'd said or done. He knew he was difficult, knew his world imposed demands and absences he had never fully explained. He gave it a week. Then Clara knocked on his office door. Clara had worked for the Moretti household for 19 years. She had learned to be present without being intrusive, to know things without saying them, to offer information only when the withholding of it would constitute a cruelty she couldn't justify. Miss Carter came that evening, Clara said. She had a key card. She came up while the dinner was still going. She paused. She was in the vestibule for a few minutes. She didn't knock. She left before anyone saw her. The silence in the office was absolute. About 4 minutes, Clara said. I checked the camera log the next day. I don't know why. I just had a feeling. Damien didn't say anything else. Clara nodded once and withdrew. He sat in his office for a long time after that. The calculation was not complicated. He had been talking about her at that table, dismissing her in front of his father and his uncle and his cousin, with a fluency that still made him cold to recall, describing her as temporary, expendable, a good 6 months. She had been standing 20 feet away. She had heard. She had turned around. She had walked out of his building and out of his city and changed her phone number and left no trail. And she had done it all without confrontation, without tears, without giving him a single moment to explain or justify or apologize. Just removed herself completely and closed the door so cleanly he hadn't even heard it shut. But here's what Damien didn't know yet. What he wouldn't know for another 3 weeks. What would change everything when he finally found out. Olivia Carter wasn't just gone. She was pregnant. 5 months along when he finally tracked her to a Kroger parking lot in Atlanta. He saw her across the asphalt before she saw him. Heavy coat, hair pulled back. That particular focused efficiency he had always associated with her. Purposeful, like she had a list in her head and was working through it. Then he saw the coat, the way it sat. He had not let himself fully assemble the reality until this moment. Had held it at a remove. Treated it as information rather than fact. Seeing it in the flat afternoon light of a grocery store parking lot was different. It arrived in his chest like something structural giving way. She turned to grab a cart from the rack. She saw him. Everything stopped. He watched her face go through 3 things in under a second. Recognition, grief, then something harder than either. She straightened. She held the cart handle. She looked at him across 30 feet of parking lot with an expression that contained absolutely nothing she was willing to give him. He walked toward her. Don't. 1 word. Flat, quiet, completely final. He stopped. Olivia. She looked past him, then back, not at his face, at a point just beside it. The way you look when you're holding a difficult conversation with someone you cannot afford to look at directly. You have nothing to say to me that I want to hear. You're right, he said, but I'm going to say it anyway. She made a small sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Of course you are. She started moving toward the store entrance. He kept pace, not too close. Clara told me about the evening you came, the dinner. She stopped walking. You were there. You heard everything I said. She was still for a moment, then, and now you feel bad. Great. Congratulations. That's wonderful for you. I'm not here to feel bad at you. I'm here because... Go home, Damien. No. She turned to face him fully then, and what was in her face was not anger. Anger would have been easier. It was something flatter and more exhaustive than anger, the expression of someone who has been through a grief and has come out the other side, into a place where the grief has become simply the shape of things, and they are not going back. You said it yourself. It was never serious. I was good company for 6 months. That was your exact description. So go back to New York and have a good life and leave me alone. Olivia, I have groceries to buy. She went inside. He found a bench near the entrance and sat on it. He waited 22 minutes until she came back out, cart full. And when she saw him still there, she stopped walking. I know about the clinic, he said. Brooklyn, 4 weeks before you left. All the color left her face. He did not press it. He simply said, I'm sorry. For everything you heard that night, I'm sorry for every word of it. What I said it because my father was at that table, and I was doing what I always do in that room. That's not a reason. It's an explanation, and it's a bad one, and I know it. She was looking at him now. Really looking. I'm not asking you for anything, he said. I'm not here with demands. I just needed you to know that I know, and I needed to ask you. He stopped, steady. Are you pregnant? The parking lot was very quiet. She looked at him for a long time. Then she loaded her groceries into the trunk of her car, got in, started the engine, and drove away. He stood there and watched until her taillights disappeared. He had his answer. Not in what she said, in what she didn't. But here's the part nobody talks about. The part that came next. Because Damien Moretti didn't go back to New York. Not yet. Not when he found out his father had sent his uncle Richard to Atlanta with a manila envelope. The kind that means a number has already been decided and written down. The kind that means, take this money and sign this agreement and disappear quietly. Richard was already inside Olivia's mother's house when Damien got there. He didn't knock. He tried the door handle. Unlocked. He pushed it open. And the first thing he saw was his uncle standing in the middle of a modest living room with a manila envelope in one hand. And Olivia, sitting on a floral couch, with her arms crossed and her chin up, and an expression on her face that Damien recognized immediately as the look she wore when she had made a decision and was waiting for the rest of the world to accept it. Her mother was standing in the kitchen doorway, watching Richard the way you watch something you haven't decided whether to throw out yet. Richard turned when Damien came in. Damien, I wasn't aware you were in Atlanta. What's in the envelope? That's a private conversation between... What's in the envelope, Richard? Richard set it on the coffee table with the deliberate care of a man who wanted the gesture to look like a reasonable offer rather than what it actually was. Your father is prepared to be generous. Miss Carter could live very comfortably. The child would have everything it needs. All we're asking... Get out. The room went quiet. Your father sent me here. I know who sent you. Damien stepped further into the room, and something in how he moved made Richard go very still. I'm telling you to get out of this house right now. And I'm telling you to call my father tonight and tell him that if anyone from this family comes near her again for any reason, they will answer to me personally. Silence. Richard picked up the envelope slowly. You're making a mistake. Then it's mine to make. Richard walked out. A minute later, the Escalade pulled away. Olivia looked at the coffee table where the envelope had been. Her arms were still crossed. The set of her jaw told Damien that what had just happened was not going to translate automatically into anything resembling gratitude. You had no right to come into my mother's house. I know. You had no right to... I know. He didn't argue it. Are you all right? She made a short, almost inaudible sound. I was handling it. I saw. Margaret Carter spoke from the kitchen doorway. Her voice was level and entirely unapologetic. You want coffee? It took Damien a second to realize she was talking to him. If that's all right. Margaret said, sit down, and went back into the kitchen. Olivia looked at her mother's retreating back with an expression that suggested she and Margaret would be having a different conversation later. Then she looked at Damien. Sit down. You're making the room feel small. He sat. But here's what Olivia didn't know, what nobody knew yet. While Damien was sitting in that living room drinking coffee and negotiating the first fragile inch of ground he'd gained, his father was already building something else. A file. Not the kind you keep in a desk drawer, the kind you build in secret. With attorneys, with interviews, with the careful collection of every visit Damien had made to Atlanta, every time he'd shown up uninvited, every word Richard had recorded about that living room confrontation. Vincent Moretti was constructing a legal case against the mother of his own grandchild. Not to use it, just to hold it, like a knife you don't draw unless you need to. And he was doing it while Damien thought he was giving Olivia space. It took 3 weeks for Damien to find out, 3 weeks of phone calls that went to voicemail, 3 weeks of short messages, I'm here. I hope you're doing okay. On the 3rd week, she called him back. I had a prenatal appointment today. Her voice was cautious, controlled. Everything is fine. The baby is fine, growing the way she's supposed to. A pause that contained something complicated. I found out the sex. I wasn't going to tell you, but then she's healthy. That's all. I just thought you should know she's healthy. He sat very still. Thank you for telling me. I have another appointment in 4 weeks. In Atlanta. It's just a standard checkup. Another pause. The silence of someone standing at the edge of something they haven't decided about yet. I'm not inviting you, she said carefully. I'm just telling you. He understood exactly what she was telling him. I'll be in Atlanta. A breath. Okay. She hung up. He sat in his office for a long time after that, the city humming 43 floors below, something in his chest that had been locked closed for 34 years, making a sound he didn't entirely recognize. 4 weeks. He could give her 4 weeks. He was 3 days into those 4 weeks when his cousin Ethan came to him with a look on his face that Damien had learned to read over 30 years of knowing him. The look that meant the thing he was about to say was not the kind of thing he wanted to say. Your father had a meeting yesterday with the Caruso family, specifically with Marco Caruso, and the topic, from what I can piece together, was a marriage arrangement. The word landed in the room like something thrown. There's a daughter, 28. Elena Caruso. The alliance would consolidate territory. Clean, profitable, political. Ethan paused, and it would make the situation in Atlanta irrelevant. Publicly, strategically. Your father would present it as moving forward. Damien said nothing. He's moving fast, Ethan said. The Carusos want an answer in 2 weeks. If your father commits to it, it becomes a family obligation. Not just his, yours. He looked at his cousin steadily. It would mean the end of whatever you're trying to build in Atlanta, Damien. Completely. The office was silent. Damien stood up slowly and went to the window. The skyline he had grown up inside. The geography of power he had always navigated without questioning its coordinates. He felt the walls closing in a way they never had before. 2 weeks. His father was giving him 2 weeks before making a decision that would make every choice Damien was trying to make impossible. He turned from the window. Get me on a flight to Atlanta. Tonight. But here's what neither of them knew. What Ethan would discover 4 days later and bring to Damien with the careful voice of a man who had been loyal his entire adult life and was now being asked to decide what that loyalty was actually made of. The Caruso meeting wasn't the plan. The Caruso meeting was the bait. While Damien had been standing outside Olivia's door giving her space, his father had been using that space as a construction site, building a file, documenting visits, recording accounts, creating a legal threat that didn't officially exist yet. And the more Damien showed up in Atlanta, the more material his father had. He had been given space as a tactic. His father had used that space as a weapon. Damien flew to Atlanta that night. He didn't call ahead. He understood, sitting in the back of the car, that showing up at midnight without warning was the wrong move, that it would read as exactly the kind of pressure he had promised himself he would not apply. He understood this clearly, and chose to do it anyway, because the alternative was sitting in New York for 2 weeks while his father built a wall around him brick by brick. And by the time Olivia was ready to open any door at all, there would be no door left to open. He checked into a hotel. He called her. Voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. He sent a text. I'm in Atlanta. I need to talk to you. Something's happened with my father. I'm not asking to come over tonight, but I need you to call me back. Nothing. He lay back on the hotel bed with his phone on his chest and stared at the ceiling and thought about his father, sitting across from Marco Caruso, with the practiced ease of a man conducting a transaction that was also, incidentally, the destruction of his son's life. His phone woke him at 6:12 in the morning. Not Olivia. Ethan. I need you to listen without reacting. Say it. My father had dinner with your father last night. After you left. Uncle Vincent knows you're in Atlanta. He assumed you'd go back the moment I told you about the Caruso meeting. He anticipated it. Another pause, shorter. Damien, he's been anticipating it. The Caruso meeting wasn't the plan. The Caruso meeting was the bait. The room went very still. The real play is a legal one. Vincent's been talking to the family's attorneys for the past 3 weeks. About paternity rights. About what it looks like legally if you establish a pattern of behavior. Flying to Atlanta. Showing up uninvited. Pressuring an unmarried woman who is on record as having left New York to get away from you. He stopped. He's been building a file, Damien, documenting your visits. Richard's visit. Everything. If he takes it to family court in Georgia, he can't take anything to family court. I haven't done anything. You showed up at her mother's house unannounced and told Richard to leave. Richard's account of that meeting describes you as aggressive and threatening. That's his account on record. Ethan's voice stayed level. I'm not saying it holds up. I'm saying it doesn't need to hold up in court. It needs to hold up long enough to make Olivia's situation legally complicated, long enough to make her feel like any connection to you puts her and the baby at risk. He paused. Your father wants her to make the legal problem go away herself. He wants her scared enough to sign something, and if you keep showing up, you're giving him the material to scare her with. Damien sat up slowly. He pressed the heel of his hand against his sternum and breathed once. There's more. Say it. The attorney your father is working with, he made contact with a woman named Priya Nair 2 days ago. Olivia's friend. Former friend, I guess, since Olivia cut contact when she left New York. The attorney approached her under the cover of a different matter entirely, asked some questions about Olivia's state of mind, her stability, whether she'd seemed erratic. A pause that felt very deliberate. Priya didn't know what she was being used for. She answered honestly, because she thought it was something else. But those answers are now in a file your father's attorney is building. Damien stood up. He walked to the window. Atlanta in early morning, gray sky, the thin light of January pressing against the glass. He's going to try to establish that she's an unstable mother. It came out flat, not a question. He's building the option to. Whether he uses it depends on whether he needs to. Right now, it's leverage. It's a threat he doesn't have to make out loud. Damien pressed 2 fingers against the cold glass without meaning to. He's been doing this for 3 weeks. Yes. While I was standing outside her door giving her time. Yes. Damien was quiet for a long moment. You knew? The word had an edge under it. A silence on Ethan's end that answered before the words did. I found out 4 days ago. I've been trying to verify it fully before I brought it to you. I didn't want to give you something half-built. Damien said nothing. I'm sorry. I should have told you the moment I suspected. Damien hung up. He stood at the window for a long time. The thing about his father's move, the thing that made it genuinely cold rather than merely ruthless, was how well it understood him. Vincent Moretti had looked at his son and correctly identified the one strategy Damien couldn't defend against directly. A frontal confrontation Damien could meet, money he could refuse to let her accept. Even a legal battle, if it came to that, he could fund and fight. But he couldn't fight a file that didn't officially exist yet. He couldn't defend Olivia against a threat that hadn't been made. And the more he showed up in Atlanta, the more material his father had. He had been given space as a tactic. His father had used that space as a construction site. He picked up his phone and called Olivia. This time she answered on the second ring. It's early. I know. I'm sorry. He heard her breath shift. The adjustment of someone sitting up in bed, coming to attention. I need to see you today. I need to tell you something in person. What happened? Not on the phone. Damien. Her voice had gone careful. The voice of someone already afraid and deciding whether to admit it. Tell me right now what level of panic I should be at. You shouldn't panic at all, but you need to hear this. A longer pause. He could hear her breathing. Slow, deliberate. He knew she was doing the thing she always did when she was deciding something. Pressing her thumb against her palm, a small private gesture he'd noticed 100 times without ever commenting on. Coffee shop on Peachtree. There's a place called Lena's. 1 hour. She hung up. He told her everything. All of it. The Caruso meeting. Ethan's call. The attorney. Priya. The file. He laid it out in sequence without softening any of it, because she needed the full picture, and she needed it straight. And the one thing he refused to do in this moment was manage her reaction by managing the information. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for almost a full minute, looking at the table surface, the wood grain, the ring his coffee cup had left, her hands flat on the table in front of her. He could see the tension in them, the way her fingers had gone very still in the deliberate way of someone preventing themselves from movement. Priya. She didn't know what she was giving them. The attorney misrepresented. I know she didn't know. Olivia's voice was controlled and very quiet. I'm not angry at Priya. She stopped. I left her behind too. I just disappeared on her. She probably answered those questions because she was worried about me, and nobody had told her anything. She pressed her lips together. That's on me. It's on my father. Yes. She looked up at him. Her eyes were steady, but there was something moving behind them. Not tears. Something older and harder than tears. He's telling me that if I try to make any of this legal, if I put your name anywhere near my daughter's life officially, he will make it a fight I can't win. He's building the threat. He hasn't made it yet. He doesn't have to make it. She said it quietly and with perfect clarity. That's the whole point. He just has to make sure I know it exists. She sat back slightly. He's very good at this. Yes, Damien said. He is. She looked at him for a long moment. And where are you in all of this? Because you're his son. This is your family's machine. And you're sitting here telling me how it works, which I appreciate. I genuinely do. But I need to understand. What does Damien Moretti actually do about his father? Not what does he intend, not what does he want. What does he actually do? The coffee shop noise filled the space between them. I'm going to go see my father today, and I'm going to tell him to shut it down. And if he doesn't, he met her eyes. Then I make it public. She blinked. What? Every operation my father runs exists in the shadow between legitimate business and what it actually is. That shadow requires the cooperation of a lot of people who need to believe the legitimate part is real. He said it without drama, just fact. If I make the existence of this file public, if I make it known that Vincent Moretti is using family attorneys to build a case against the unmarried pregnant woman his son was involved with, it doesn't matter that it never goes to court. The story is the weapon. I give that story to the right people. It lives in the room for years. Every business conversation he tries to have, every alliance he tries to build. It's in the room. Olivia was staring at him. You'd burn your own family. I'd burn a specific operation my father built to threaten the mother of my daughter. Those are different things. She was quiet for a long moment. He'll never forgive you. Probably not. Your position in the family. I'm not naive about what this costs. I've been thinking about it since 6 this morning. But I need you to understand that I am not operating inside my father's plan anymore. I'm done letting him move pieces and then reacting. He leaned forward slightly. I need you to trust me enough to give me 48 hours. Let me go to New York, have this conversation with my father face to face, and deal with it directly. If it works, the file goes away, and my father understands that you are off limits permanently. If it doesn't work, you burn it down. Yes. She looked at him for a long time. She had, he thought, the most honest face he had ever seen on a person. Not in the sense of being easy to read, but in the sense that what was on it was always what was actually there. No performance. 48 hours, she said finally. He nodded. And then you call me. Whatever happened, you call me first. Yes. She pushed her chair back and stood. She was reaching for her coat when she stopped and looked at him with an expression that was different from anything else she'd shown him this morning. Quieter, more complicated, almost against her will. She kicks at night, she said. The baby. Around 10 every night, like she's announcing something. She paused. I thought you should know that. He looked up at her. She nodded once and walked out. He was in the elevator, descending 32 floors toward Park Avenue, when his phone buzzed. Not Ethan, not Olivia. A number he didn't recognize. Georgia area code. He answered. A woman's voice. Professional. Very calm. Mr. Moretti, this is Dr. Anita Webb, calling from Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. I'm trying to reach the emergency contact for Olivia Carter. She listed your name and number as... His stomach dropped through the elevator floor. What happened? Ms. Carter was brought in approximately 40 minutes ago. She's stable, but she went into early labor, and there are some complications. We need to... The doctor's voice continued. Precise. Measured. But Damien had already stopped processing the specific words, because the only word that mattered had already reached him. Complications. And underneath it, the word the doctor hadn't said yet. The word that lived inside complications when you were 7 months pregnant and you were alone, and 40 minutes had already passed before anyone thought to. He was already moving before the doctor finished the sentence. Elevator doors opened at the lobby, and he was through them before they had fully parted. Coat in one hand, phone at his ear, crossing the marble floor at a pace that made the security desk guard stand up slightly before recognizing him and sitting back down. He hit the street, and the January air came at him like a wall. He was already calling Ethan with his other hand. 2 phones. 2 calls, both ringing. Dr. Webb was still talking. The placenta has partially separated, which is causing the early labor, and we're monitoring both her and the baby closely, but at 32 weeks, there are protocols we need to. Is she conscious? Yes, she's in pain, but she's conscious and stable. We're managing. I need to be there. Mr. Moretti, that's entirely. How long does she have before you have to make a decision about delivery? A brief pause. The pause of a professional recalibrating. We're trying to slow the labor. If we can stabilize in the next few hours, we may be able to hold off, but if the separation worsens, I'll be there in 2.5 hours. Do not make any decisions that can wait until I'm there. The medical decisions are made in consultation with the patient. I know that. I'm asking you not to let her face them alone. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. He didn't try to hide it. Please. Another pause. Shorter. We'll keep her informed and supported. Come quickly. He hung up. Ethan picked up on the first ring. I need a car to JFK right now, and the first available flight to Atlanta. Charter or commercial? Move. What happened? Olivia, hospital, early labor, complications. Move, Ethan. He heard Ethan already typing. Cars 4 minutes. There's a Delta flight at 4:50. You can make it if. Get me on it. Done. Damien. A pause. She's going to be all right. He didn't answer that. He stood on the sidewalk and thought about a woman in a hospital bed in Atlanta who had listed his name as her emergency contact. When? He didn't know. He hadn't known that. That information arrived in him now with a physical weight. And who was alone with something frightening and medical, and 7 months along, and the 2.5 hours between him and that room felt like geography he could not accept. The car arrived in 3 minutes. He got through security at JFK with 8 minutes to spare and boarded still in his coat, walking straight down the jet bridge while the attendant behind him said something about the boarding process that he didn't hear. He sat in the window seat and put his phone on his knee and stared at it. She had put his name down, somewhere in the process of building her new life in Atlanta. Prenatal forms, hospital intake paperwork, the administrative machinery of having a baby. She had written his name in the box that said emergency contact, and she had put his phone number beside it, and she had not told him. He didn't know what to do with that. He sat with it the way you sit with something that's too large to hold properly, just keeping it close, letting it press against you. The flight was 1 hour and 41 minutes. He spent most of it with his elbow on the armrest and his hand over his mouth, staring at the seat back in front of him, running calculations he couldn't complete because he didn't have enough information. Placenta separation, 32 weeks, early labor. He knew enough to know that 32 weeks was not catastrophic. Babies born at 32 weeks survived, thrived, grew up and lived whole lives. But he also knew enough to know that it was not nothing, that it was a territory of risk, and Olivia was in it alone. He landed at 5:43. He was in a cab before the jet bridge door had finished opening. Grady Memorial. The driver nodded and merged into the airport traffic. Damien sat in the back watching Atlanta come at him through the window and called Dr. Webb's number. She answered after 2 rings. She's still in labor. We've been administering medication to slow the contractions. It's working partially, but the separation is stable. It hasn't worsened. That's good. How is she? A slight pause. She's frightened. She's managing it the way she manages most things, which is by asking very precise questions and processing the answers carefully. But she's frightened. Her mother is here, has been since about an hour after Miss Carter arrived. A brief warmth entered the doctor's professional register. Mrs. Carter is a very settled presence. Yes, he said. She is. Mr. Moretti, when you arrived, she knows you're coming. I told her you called. I hope that was all right. He stopped. What did she say? She said, a pause, like the doctor was deciding something. She said, okay. He hung up and looked out the window at the highway and thought, okay. In Olivia Carter's language, okay from a hospital bed at 32 weeks meant something. He didn't know exactly what, but it meant something. Grady Memorial was a large urban hospital, broad, loud, the particular organized chaos of a place that handled everything and paused for nothing. He went to the maternity ward on the 4th floor, gave his name at the desk. A nurse led him down a hallway that smelled of antiseptic and floor wax and the peculiar tension of places where consequential things were constantly happening behind closed doors. The nurse stopped at room 412, knocked twice, opened the door. The room was small, utilitarian, one bed, monitoring equipment, a chair that Margaret Carter was occupying, with her coat still on, and her hands folded in her lap in that way she had. The posture of a woman who had decided this situation would not exceed her capacity to manage it. She looked at Damien when he came in, without surprise, without particular warmth, but without hostility, either. The look of a woman who had decided to defer her judgment until more information was available. Olivia was in the bed. She had a fetal monitor strapped around her abdomen and an IV in her left arm, and the hospital gown that reduced everyone to the same vulnerable register, regardless of anything else about them. Her hair was loose. Her face was pale. She was looking at the ceiling when he came in, and then she looked at him. He crossed the room and stood at the side of the bed. "Hi," she said. Her voice was rough, not from crying, he thought, from the particular exhaustion of managed fear, sustained over several hours. "Hi." He looked at the monitors. The heartbeat line moved in its steady rhythm. "How are you feeling?" "Like someone is trying to evict my daughter 6 weeks early." A short breath through the nose. Not quite a laugh. "The doctor says if they can keep the contractions slow for another 12 hours, the separation might stabilize enough to not need emergency delivery." She looked at the monitor. "We're at hour 3. He pulled the second chair to the side of the bed and sat in it. Margaret watched this without comment. "You didn't have to come," Olivia said. "Yes, I did." She looked at him, not arguing, just taking it in. "You put my name down," he said quietly. She looked away at the monitors. "I did it weeks ago, after the grocery store. I don't entirely know why." "I do," he said. She didn't ask him to explain. He didn't. Margaret said from her chair, "I'm going to get coffee." She stood. She looked at Damien for a moment, a long, assessing look that contained an entire chapter's worth of things she was choosing not to say. And then she walked out and closed the door. The room was very quiet except for the monitor. Olivia shifted slightly in the bed, adjusting her position with the careful movement of someone working around discomfort. He almost reached for her arm and stopped himself. And then she said, without looking at him, "You can," and stopped. Tried again. "It helps to have something to hold on to during the contractions." He reached out and put his hand over hers on the bed rail. She didn't look at him, but her hand turned over and her fingers closed around his, and she held on with a grip that was tighter than he expected, and said nothing. And he said nothing, and the monitor kept its rhythm. 12 hours. They had 12 hours to find out if the body would cooperate with what everyone needed it to do. At hour 7, the contractions had slowed significantly. At hour 9, Dr. Webb said the word they'd been waiting for. Stable. The separation had not worsened. The baby's heart rate was strong and consistent. The early labor was responding to the medication. If the next 3 hours held, they would take Olivia off the emergency protocol and move to monitoring. Damien felt something that had been locked in his chest for 9 hours, release so suddenly it almost hurt. Olivia said, "Okay," in her precise, controlled way. And then, when Dr. Webb had gone, she turned her head to the side, and he saw the exact moment the control slipped. Not collapsed, just slipped. Just the one moment. And she pressed the back of her free hand against her mouth, and breathed out very slowly, and her eyes were bright, but nothing fell. Margaret stood up and came to the other side of the bed and put her hand on her daughter's hair and said nothing, which was the right thing. Damien kept his hand where it was. At hour 11, Olivia slept. Her grip on his hand loosened as she went under. Gradually, then fully. And he sat in the chair and watched the monitor and let her sleep. Margaret watched him from the other chair. She had been watching him in the particular peripheral way of someone conducting a long assessment for the past 11 hours. He was aware of it. He didn't address it. At some point past midnight, she said, quietly enough not to wake Olivia, she named the baby. He looked at her. She hasn't told you. It wasn't a question. No. Margaret was quiet for a moment. She told me 2 weeks ago. She was very certain about it. She paused. Clara. He looked at the monitor. The name arrived in him quietly, and then less quietly. The weight of it. The specific choice of it. The woman who had knocked on his office door and told him the truth about the night Olivia had come to the penthouse and turned around. She knows? Olivia called her, in December, to say thank you. A pause. Clara apparently cried for 10 minutes. He sat with that. You hurt my daughter very badly, Margaret said, not accusatory, just plainly, the way you state geography. I know. She is not a woman who forgives things easily or completely. She looked at her daughter's sleeping face. She gets that from me. I know that too. Margaret was quiet for a moment. She's going to need help. The real kind. Not money. Not arrangements. Presents. She looked at him. The 10 o'clock kind. He met her eyes. I understand. Margaret nodded once. At hour 12, Dr. Webb came back in. She checked the readings. She checked them again. She made a note on her tablet and looked at Olivia, who had woken up in the last 20 minutes and was watching the doctor's face with the focused attention of someone reading a verdict. The labor has stopped, Dr. Webb said. The separation is stable. We're going to keep you overnight for observation, and there will be strict rest requirements for the final weeks, but we are not delivering tonight. Olivia closed her eyes. When she opened them, she looked at Damien. He was already looking at her. She said, She's okay. She's okay. She nodded. Something moved across her face, relief and exhaustion, and something else. Something that had been held at careful arm's length for months, and was in this room, with her hands still loosely around his, a little closer than it had been. Then the door opened. Not Dr. Webb, not a nurse. Ethan. He came in quickly and quietly, and the look on his face was the one Damien had been trained since childhood to register. Not panic. Ethan never panicked. But the compressed, careful expression of someone holding something in that needed to come out. He looked at Olivia. I'm glad you're all right. He meant it. Then he looked at Damien. Damien stood. Outside. Ethan said. In the hallway, under the fluorescent lights with the ward noise moving around them, Ethan spoke quietly and quickly. Your father called Marco Caruso tonight. 2 hours ago. I just found out. Damien went still. He withdrew the alliance offer entirely, told Caruso the family was restructuring internally and was not in a position to formalize new arrangements. Ethan paused. And then he called 3 of our longest-standing partners, Belmont Logistics, the Ferrara Group, the Whitfield Property Trust, and he told all 3 of them the same thing, that the organization is in transition, that decisions going forward will require dual authorization. He held Damien's eyes. Dual, meaning him and you, meaning nothing moves without your sign-off. Ethan paused. That's not a concession, that's a restructuring. He's formalizing you as co-authority, which means he's also formalizing you as co-responsible. Everything the family does from this point, every operation, every arrangement, every decision, is on your name too. Officially. He stopped. He's not stepping back. He's pulling you in deeper. Damien looked at the wall. He's doing it because of tonight, because he knows you're in that room. He's saying, you want to choose her? Fine. But you choose her inside this family, inside this name, with your hands in everything this family does." He stopped. "He's not letting you walk away clean, Damien. He's making sure that whatever life you build in Atlanta, it is built inside the Moretti organization, permanently, completely, and Olivia and your daughter live inside it too, whether she knows it or not." The hallway hummed. Damien stood very still and felt the shape of his father's move settle fully into him, the elegance of it, the cruelty of it, the way it used his own choice as the mechanism of the trap. He had walked into that hospital room to protect Olivia from the Moretti name, and his father had just legally embedded that name into every decision Damien would make for the rest of his life. He stood in that hallway for a long time after Ethan finished. The fluorescent lights above him did what hospital lights always do, flattened everything, removed shadow, made the world look like a place where things could be examined without mercy. Ethan waited. He had the patience of a man who had spent 30 years knowing when his cousin needed silence more than counsel. Damien thought about his father, not with anger. The anger had burned through its fuel somewhere over the Atlantic months ago, and what remained was something colder and more permanent than anger. He thought about Vincent Moretti at 68, sitting in that corner office on Park Avenue, making phone calls in the dark hours of a January night to restructure an entire criminal organization's authorization chain because his son had chosen to sit in a hospital room in Atlanta instead of coming home. He thought about the specific architecture of his father's mind, the way it treated love as a liability to be managed, the way it turned every human choice into a strategic variable, the way it had looked at Damien's presence in that hospital room and seen not a man sitting beside the mother of his child, but a weakness that needed to be converted into a leash. He thought about the yellow shoes. He thought about Clara and the name Olivia had given a baby who wasn't born yet. He thought about the 10 o'clock kicks. He thought about a woman lying in a hospital bed who had written his name in the emergency contact box weeks ago without telling him and had held his hand for 11 hours without asking for anything except that he not move. He thought about what it would mean to spend the rest of his life co-authoring decisions for an organization that operated in the space between legal and criminal with his name on every document, his signature on every arrangement. Olivia and Clara living inside a structure that his father had built and that his father had just formally locked him deeper into. And he thought, no, not negotiated, no, not strategic no, not the no that comes with a counteroffer or a modified arrangement. Just no, the flat, final kind, the kind that comes from somewhere below calculation, from whatever part of a person is left when everything that's been constructed around them gets stripped away. He looked at Ethan. "Call Whitfield, tonight. Tell them the dual authorization arrangement is not in effect. Tell them any communication from the Moretti organization goes through me directly, or it doesn't go at all." Ethan blinked. "That directly contradicts your father's." "I know. Damien, he'll treat that as... I know what he'll treat it as." His voice was very quiet. "Make the call." Ethan looked at him for a long moment, the look of a man who had been loyal his entire adult life and was now being asked to decide what that loyalty was actually made of. Then he took out his phone. "Belmont and Ferrara too?" "All three, tonight." Ethan nodded and stepped away down the corridor. Damien went back into the room. Olivia was awake when he came back in. Margaret had fallen asleep in her chair with her coat still on, the deep economical sleep of a woman who had learned to rest efficiently because rest was a resource and you didn't waste resources. The monitor kept its rhythm. The room was quiet. Olivia watched him cross to the chair beside her bed and sit. She looked at his face. What happened? Not a question, the way she'd said it before. This was a different register, quieter, more careful, the voice of someone who could read the specific quality of stillness on a person and was bracing for what it meant. He told her, all of it. The dual authorization, what his father had done with his presence in this hospital room. He told it plainly and completely, without softening the operational details because she had earned the full picture 3 conversations ago, and he was done deciding what she could handle. She listened. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment, looking at the monitor. He's very good. Yes. He looked at you choosing me, and turned it into a mechanism to bind you tighter. Yes. She was quiet again. Then what did you do? I called it off. All 3 contacts, tonight. She looked at him. What does that mean for the organization? It means my father and I have an open conflict tomorrow morning instead of a slow one. I've been managing the slow version for months. I'm done managing it. Olivia looked at the ceiling. He could see her processing it. The full weight of what tomorrow looked like. What the version of his life he was describing would actually cost. You could lose everything. Your position, the organization, the relationships your family has built for. Yes. That's not nothing, Damien. I know that. I need you to actually know it. Her voice had an edge in it. Not anger, something more precise than anger. The voice of a woman who needed the man beside her to have counted the cost clearly before he paid it. Because she was not willing to be the reason someone destroyed their life on an impulse and resented it slowly over years. I need you to know it the way you'll know it in 10 years, in 20, when it's not a hospital room and you're not running on adrenaline and it's just a Tuesday and you have less than you might have had. He looked at her steadily. I know it that way. Do you? I've been thinking about my father since I was 8 years old, about what he built and what it cost him, about the version of a man you become when you treat every person in your life as a variable. He's brilliant, and he is powerful, and he has nothing. Not one person in that organization who is there because they want to be, rather than because they have to be. Not one relationship that would survive the removal of the leverage. He paused. I have watched that my entire life and called it strength, because I didn't know what else to call it. I know what to call it now. She looked at him. I'm not walking away from everything. I'm walking away from what he built. What I've built is different. Different partners, different operations, things I can put my name on in daylight. It's enough to live on. It's enough to build something real. He stopped. I'm not asking you to trust the Moretti name. I'm asking you to trust what I'm building instead. A very long silence. The monitor. Margaret's quiet breathing from her chair. Outside down the hallway, someone laughed. A nurse, short and genuine. The sound of a person having a normal moment in an abnormal place. You're going to call your father tomorrow. Yes. And say what? That I'm separating from the organization's central structure, that my operations are mine, that he doesn't have co-authorization on anything with my name on it, and I don't carry co-authorization on anything with his. He kept his voice level. I'll offer him a clean separation, no conflict, no exposure, no leverage used against either side. Just parallel, separate. And if he doesn't accept that, Damien was quiet for a moment. Then it gets harder before it gets easier. She absorbed that. Clara kicks at 10. She said it quietly. He looked at her. I need you to understand what you're signing up for. Not the Moretti heir, not the man who sweeps in and fixes things and then goes back to New York. The man who is there at 10 o'clock when she kicks and she can't sleep, and at 2 in the morning when she's sick, and at every appointment, and at every ordinary, unremarkable Tuesday that doesn't feel like a movie. She held his eyes. That man. That's what she needs. That's what I want to be. Wanting isn't enough. I know. He didn't look away. Give me the chance to show you the difference. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, move the chair closer. He did. She closed her eyes. He sat beside her and listened to the monitor mark the hours. He called his father at 8 the next morning, from the hospital parking lot. The January air was sharp, and the sky was that particular pale gray that precedes real winter light. He stood beside the rental car with his coat buttoned and his breath making small clouds, and waited for Vincent to answer. Vincent picked up on the third ring. No greeting. I know why you're calling. Then I'll be brief. I'm separating my operations from the family structure. Clean line. Nothing shared, nothing crossed. You keep what you built. I keep what I've built. No conflict. A silence. You're doing this from Atlanta. From a hospital parking lot, I assume. Yes. While she's still in there. She was discharged an hour ago. She's fine. The baby is fine. Another silence. Then, unexpectedly, His father said, "Good." Just the word, flat, but something underneath it that Damien filed away. The dual authorization was a move. I understand it. It was a good one, but it's done. The contacts know. There won't be confusion going forward. You think I'll accept this? I think you're practical enough to accept a clean separation over an open conflict that costs us both and benefits nobody. A long pause. The Caruso alliance is your business, not mine. Do what you want with it. And Olivia? Damien felt his jaw tighten. Her name is Olivia. And Olivia? His father said the name with something that was almost effort. Not warmth, but an attempt at precision. The adjustment of a man being asked to reclassify something. She stays in Atlanta. For now, yes. And my granddaughter? The word landed differently than Damien expected. He heard something in it. Not sentimentality. Vincent Moretti was not built for sentimentality, but something that lived in the same region. An acknowledgement. The reluctant registration of a fact that had emotional weight, regardless of how inconvenient that weight was. Her name is Clara, Damien said. Silence. She's not born yet, but when she is, that's her name. He heard his father breathe. Once. Slow. I won't have interference in their lives. From you, or from anyone in the organization. That's the line. Everything else, the operations, the structure, the business, we can negotiate the details, but that line doesn't move. A very long pause. The Whitfield group will want a formal letter, Vincent said finally, clarifying the structure. Which meant yes. Not gracious, not warm, just practical and final. The way his father accepted everything. By treating it as an operational matter once the emotional battle was lost. I'll have something drafted this week. See that you do. He almost hung up. Then he said, Father. What? A pause. He hadn't planned to say anything else, but standing in the parking lot with his breath clouding and the pale sky overhead, and Clara somewhere in a hospital building behind him with a heartbeat that had been strong and consistent all night, he said, You could meet her when she's born, if you wanted to. The silence this time was different from the others. We'll see, Vincent said, and hung up. Damien stood in the parking lot for a moment longer. He looked at the sky. He thought about the word we'll see and what it contained. Not a yes. Not the warmth that a grandfather was supposed to offer, but something. And he decided that something was enough to work with. 3 months later, on a warm Atlanta evening in May, Damien's phone rang during dinner. He was at the kitchen table, Margaret's kitchen table, which had become over the past 3 months the center of a life he was still surprised to be living. Clara was in the baby monitor on the counter, her breathing the small, constant sound that had become the rhythm of the house. Olivia was across from him with her hands around a glass of water and a report open on her laptop. She had gone back to freelance work 2 weeks ago with the focused efficiency of a woman who found inactivity agitating. He looked at the phone screen. His father. He and Vincent had spoken 4 times since January. Short calls. Operational. The careful technical language of 2 men working out the details of a separation that was never going to be simple. There had been no warmth in the calls, and no hostility either. Just the exhausted pragmatism of people who had fought and reached an arrangement and were now living inside it. He excused himself and went out to the back porch. Father, the Whitfield letter. It arrived. The structure is clear. A pause. Belmont confirmed this morning. Good. Another pause. Longer than the operational ones. Ethan tells me she was born in February. Damien was quiet for a moment. Clara? Yes, February 22nd. Clara, his father repeated. Just the name. Something moved through the word. Something Damien recognized now, after months of watching it operate at a distance, in a man who had spent 60 years teaching himself to suppress it. Recognition of the name and of what it meant that she had chosen it. She looks like you, Damien said. The jaw. A silence. I'll be in Atlanta next month, Vincent said. Business. I may have some time. I'll let Olivia know. A pause. She'll need to agree to it. Yes. Damien said. She will. And if she doesn't, then you come back another time. His voice was quiet and without apology. That's how it works. A very long silence. All right, Vincent said. He hung up. Damien stood on the back porch and looked at the yard. The 2 trees and the bird feeder. The warm evening air. The kind of ordinary that he had spent 34 years moving through without ever once stopping to look at directly. He could hear Olivia inside, the shift of her chair, the quiet sounds of a house that was inhabited and working. He went back in. She looked up when he came through the door. Your father? He wants to come meet her next month. She looked at her glass for a moment. He watched her process it. The full history of that. Everything it contained. Everything it cost her to consider it. Then she said, she should know her grandfather. She looked up. Even if he's difficult. He is very difficult. So is she already, Olivia said. Maybe they'll understand each other. He sat back down across from her. From the monitor came a small sound, not distress, just Clara announcing something to the empty room, the unprompted vocalizations of a 3-month-old discovering that sound existed. Olivia reached over and turned up the volume, and they both listened. It went quiet again. Damien looked at Olivia across the table, at the woman who had walked out of his penthouse with $42 shoes in her purse and rebuilt her life from scratch, who had carried a daughter alone through months of fear, and had never once asked him for anything she hadn't decided he'd actually earned. And he thought about the long distance between who he had been and where he was sitting. Not arrived. He understood that. Not finished. Not resolved. Not the clean ending of a story that didn't have one. Just here. In this kitchen. At this table. With the monitor on the counter, and the warm May evening coming through the window, and everything that needed to be built still in front of them. Clara's going to wake up in about an hour, Olivia said, without looking up from her work. Can you take the first one? Yes, he said. She turned the page. He cleared the dinner plates. And outside, the spring evening settled over the quiet Atlanta street, where a girl named Clara was sleeping in a house that was still being built. Not from stone or money or the name on the door, but from the daily unspectacular, irreplaceable work of 2 people who had broken something between them and were choosing every ordinary day to build something better in its place. That was the story. Not a fairy tale. Something stronger,